The 2022 US Open women's semifinals are set, and the top players have shown up and shown out, from world number 1 Iga Swiatek taking on another top 10 player in Aryna Sabalenka, then two of the most informed players this spring/summer on Jabeur and Garcia. I'll preview both of these matchups and predict who I believe we'll see in the finals here on Grand Slam Tennis News Today. First, looking at Iga and Aryna, they've played 4 times, 3 this season, all of which Iga's taken very decisively. Their most recent meeting was in the Rome semifinals, where Swiatek cruised to a 6-2, 6-1 victory. Iga obviously has a much better win-loss record on the year, as she's been much more solid overall. The two are pretty similar in terms of the amount of time they spent on court, as Sabalenka's been out there just 10 minutes longer. This is Iga's first US Open semifinal and 4th major semifinal overall, while this is Sabalenka's 3rd major semi and 2nd US Open last 4 appearance. Iga really cruised through her first few matches here in the Open, beating Jasmine Paolini and Sloane Stephens very easily. The scoreline with Lauren Davis looks comprehensive, but the world number 1 struggled quite a bit, especially in that second set, where she recovered from a 3-love deficit to win the next 6 of 7 games. Swiatek had a much bigger scare in the 4th round, coming back from a set and breakdown against German Julie Niemeyer before sealing victory with a bagel. Then lastly, Jessica Pegula was the most recent victim, as Iga took care of her 6-3, 7-6 in the quarters. This has really been a typical good slam for Iga, where she starts well the first few rounds, 2 rounds, dips a bit in the 3rd and 4th, then slowly starts to pick it up in the quarters and then plays some of her best tennis in the semis and final. In the lead-up tournaments prior to the Open, Swiatek's forehand was shockingly bad in the matches in which she lost to Haddad Maia and Keys. It was equally bad against Niemeyer, and she would have bitten the dust if Julie hadn't choked as hard as she did. In these last few rounds, Iga's play has been pretty patchy, and at times it seems like she's been scamming her way through the tournament in a sense. I say this because her level hasn't been very high at all, and her opponents have let her off the hook on many different occasions. Giving her credit though, she's a very clutch player, and she just knows how to play the big points best. Once she was able to scam that second set against Niemeyer, for example, she totally steamrolled to the end to claim victory. Iga hasn't served that great this tournament either, and she's gotten broken quite a bit in the last few rounds, 5 against Niemeyer and 6 to Pegula. Swiatek's returned well, but honestly she hasn't faced a true solid server, so she has been tested a whole bunch in that avenue. Focusing on this recent match with Pegula, the early stretches were very rough, and Iga went down a break at 3-2 and was left 30 down in that game, but Jessica flubbed a pretty easy swing volley, and that changed the entire course of the set. Iga started hitting with greater range and cut down significantly on her unforced errors. Meanwhile, it was raining mistakes from Pegula. Literally every time she stepped up to the line, she ended the point with a ground stroke in the net. Iga got up an early break in the second set, and it appeared that she ran away with the match, but Jessica started cleaning up her act, especially whenever she received serve, and she initiated a cycle of breaking, then getting broken the very next game. She really should have won the second set, because in many of her service games she had gained points, but she wavered a bit mentally, while Iga elevated and rose to the occasion. Jessie's really poor serving did her in, which is a shame because she returned very well. However, as I keep saying, Iga's champion instincts were too strong in the end. Looking at Aryna, she shouldn't even be here, and I say this because she was down 6-2, 5-1 in the second round to Kaya Kanepi. She managed to claw her way back in the second, which went to a tiebreak. Sabalenka faced and saved 2 match points there before winning it 6-4 in the third. That was definitely a major turning point for Sabalenka in this tournament, as her level reached a higher notch from there, as she then went on to dominate Clara Burel, then took out the red-hot Danielle Collins, and then finally eliminated Karolina Pliskova in straight sets in the quarterfinals. Now, Aryna's story is similar to Iga's in that her opponents haven't been playing their best tennis either. Collins was excellent from the ground that first set and a half, but her level dropped pretty significantly towards the end. The quality of that match also just wasn't very great, as Danamo missed far too many first serves. Sabalenka probably played her best match of the entire tournament against Karolina Pliskova, where she was completely dominant on serve and didn't allow the Czech literally any looks at breaking. The first serve percentage was high at 69%, and she backed it up well, winning 73% of points when doing so. The second serve was also very good for the Belarusian, winning 63% of points there and only hitting 3 double faults. Of course, Aryna is notorious for having the yips on the second serve and absolutely pouring out double faults, but she's kept that in check fairly nicely this fortnight. Now, for Iga to make it 4 straight wins over Aryna, she needs to return strong here. Iga returned so unbelievably well in their Doha match, really all of their matches this season, but I'm going to focus a bit on Doha right now since that was on hard court. For Iga to get the same end result, she needs to maintain a high level of play from return. While Sabalenka didn't hit her spots the best, Swiatek read her serve very well and put her under constant duress in each of her service games. She needs to try her best to do the same again here. Granted, it will be difficult with how well Aryna's been serving. I say a goal for her would be to try and make as many returns as possible and get Aryna in more baseline exchanges and ultimately crumble. I feel like eventually the serve from Sabalenka would wane a bit if Swiatek elevates her returning, much like we've seen in the past. Regardless, as I keep saying, this won't be an easy task as Aryna's been serving well. Plus, while Iga's returned well this tournament, she hasn't nearly faced a server like Sabalenka. Iga should also maneuver the ball well against Sabalenka like she did previously and get the second seed stretched out all around the court. In Doha, Iga spread the court very nicely, getting good fine angles, which exploited Aryna's movement, which isn't terrible, but definitely not the best. Also, Aryna does not want to be playing tennis on the defensive and on the move, so Iga definitely excels in that type of matchup. The third and final point here for Swiatek is to simply serve better. I really want Iga to up her serving in this matchup. It was too shaky against Pegula and she didn't hit her spots well enough at all. Jessica looked way too comfortable out there on return, and that can't be the case with Aryna, who has a much longer wingspan anyways. This is also especially important because if Aryna's serve is on, Iga needs to make sure that she holds her own on serve to remain in touching distance. Speaking of serve, I want Aryna to keep serving strong throughout the semifinal. As I mentioned earlier, Sabalenka's serve has been her saving grace this fortnight, and it can be no different against the world number 1. Aryna must hold on to that serve as much as possible. In all of their matches this year, Sabalenka has been broken far too many times. A high first serve percentage won't merely cut it. Barring Rome, her first serve percentage was high in all of their matches, but the first and second serve points won was way too low. In those matches, she didn't hit her spots well enough at all, which allowed Iga more opportunities at gaining the upper hand and controlling the court. The second point I have for the 6th seed is to attack Swiatek's serve relentlessly. I don't really need to go into much detail about this. This summer, power players like Garcia and Madison Keys have been very successful in doing this, stepping in and taking that second serve earlier, which takes time away from Iga, and she needs to do the same here, Aryna. In their Rome match, I thought Sabalenka was being really ridiculous and backing up and just trying to make second serve returns instead of stepping up and going after it. Having that aggressive intent puts pressure on Iga and gets her on the defensive where she doesn't really want to be. The third and last point coincides with this, which is to beat Iga with pace. Keys did this wonderfully in Cincinnati, rushing Iga with her great pace and depth, which took away time from her and broke that forehand down quite a bit. For my final match prediction, I'm going with Iga in 3 sets. Really, Aryna should win this match as she's been playing the better tennis this fortnight, but I said the same with Pegula and look what happened. You just can't underestimate the pressure of the moment as Sabalenka will be playing for that long coveted major final. She came very close last year but basically crumbled against Lily Fernandez in that semifinal match. I think her being the underdog here might help her in this regard as she won't have nearly as much pressure or expectation. Still though, in the crucial moments, I think Iga will be the stronger of the two. The matchup itself is a very important factor right now too, as Iga just has Aryna's number to a T. She just honestly seems to like that type of ball that comes off Aryna's racket, and she's not only beaten the Belarusian but dominated their last few affairs. I feel like this will be sitting with Aryna and hold her back in the big moments like it did with Pegula. I also want to mention how Iga thrives in these big stages. The later we are in the tournament, the better Iga plays. Same with the ranking of opponent, as Iga has won her last 8 top 10 matches on straight sets. Sabalenka definitely has the game to end that streak, but but ultimately I believe Iga will be too tough to stop in the end and will raise that level when need be once more. Quickly looking at the second semifinal between Ons Jabeur and Caroline Garcia, Ons leads the head-to-head 2-0, but those other meetings were years ago, and both women were totally different players. Both Ons and Caroline have had a phenomenal second half of the season, both earning 40 plus wins thus far. Carol's been more dominant this fortnight, I feel, being on court for over an hour less. This is Garcia's first slam semifinal and Jabeur's second straight one. Looking at the French woman's dominating display, she hasn't dropped a set this whole tournament thus far, let alone more than 4 games per set. Her most impressive wins came in the later rounds, where she clobbered former champion Bianca Andreescu 3-2, took out Ali Risk 4-1, and just kind of overwhelmed Coco Gauff in the quarters 3-4. Simply put, Carol's been solid on all aspects of her game, from the serve, return especially, and then of course the ground, where she's just been totally overwhelming opponents. Against Coco, her forehand was the big weapon, as that cross was able to open up the court for her to where she could get either unreturnables or finish up at the net, where she's very solid. As I briefly touched upon, the return has been a big aspect of Garcia's game and success, as she's been able to take time away from opponents and put them under immediate pressure on their own serves. Now, Garcia's definitely been the most solid overall this tournament, but she's had her moments of vulnerability too, although they haven't been that glaring. Against Coco, her service level dipped after her excellent 4-0 start, and the American had some opportunities to push the set deeper, but the pressure from Garcia's ground and defensive prowess got the American a bit mentally. Meanwhile, Ons Jabeur started her US Open campaign with 7-5, 6-2 wins over Madison Brengle and Elizabeth Manlik. In the third round, the Tunisian played her third straight American, coming back from behind to defeat Shelby Rogers. She then finally got that elusive victory over Veronika Kudermetova, winning 7-6, 6-4. Then lastly in the quarters, Ons avenged doubles partner Serena, taking out Ajla Tomljanovic 6-4, 7-6. Throughout the tournament, Ons has shown bursts of high-level tennis while also having moments of kind of mid-form. It was like that against Shelby in that third rounder, where she was just getting worked around on the court initially and totally outplayed, but was able to turn things around in the nick of time. Ons was also down earlier against Veronika Kudermetova, but started serving a lot better and started getting better reads on the Russian serve to shift the momentum into her favor. Against Ajla, Jabeur was pretty solid overall and a bit less streaky. However, her serve was kind of an outlying issue there, as she missed far too many first serves. Against Caroline, Ons must raise that first serve percentage, because if she gives her the same amount of second serve looks as she did Tomljanovic, she'll be toast. 40% of first serves in is not going to cut it here, even if you win 71% of first serve points. The first serve is important because it sets Ons up nicely for her best shot, the forehand. Jabeur is going to want to look for that forehand early on here and try to dictate with it from the ground. Coco didn't have as strong or penetrating a forehand as Jabeur, so the Tunisian has an opportunity to make Garcia more uncomfortable in that aspect. Carol likely won't have as big an edge in those forehand to forehand exchanges too, which is all good for Ons. The last point here for Jabeur is to maintain focus. I alluded to this earlier, but there's been many times in the tournament where Ons has just had a real dip in play. In the second set with Tomljanovic, she was up a break 3-2, then kind of lost focus a bit and started spraying a bit more to go down 5-3 in danger of losing the set. She was able to get it together in the end, but I don't think Garcia will grant her such opportunities. For Caroline to be successful, I want her to stay committed with her shots and to that winning game of just being so incredibly solid from the ground and overwhelming opponents. Ons is excellent from the backcourt as well, but she definitely won't be immune to the constant pressure from Garcia and would surely spray a few errors. The second thing Carol needs to do is to look to exploit Ons' backhand. Garcia's backhand is the stronger of the two, as Jabeur's tends to spray a bit more and break down. She needs to possibly look for more backhand to backhand exchanges, which can then open up the court for her to do greater damage herself. Then the last point I have is to pressure and attack the Jabeur second serve. I'm literally not even going to explain myself much further, but Ons' first serve percentage against Isla was abysmal, and if Garcia can constantly apply pressure to the Tunisian second serve, she can totally dismantle it. So for this one, I'm going to go with Garcia in 3 sets. I can see Caroline having another dominant display, but I feel that Ons definitely won't go down without a fight and will put up a good resistance. Also, the occasion of Garcia playing for her first slam final will definitely be a factor for the French woman. The biggest concern with Ons I have is her ability to consistently sustain that high level of tennis, but I don't really have those concerns or worries with Caroline, which is why I ultimately have her taking this match. That's all I have for these semifinal previews, and let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree with me having Iga and Caroline progress through to the finals. Also, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell so you're notified whenever I post the women's final preview and maybe the men's semifinal preview. I don't know yet. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Grand Slam Tennis News Today.